The fire crackled low in the stone hearth. Outside, June wind carried the scent of pine and coming rain through the open window of the mountain cabin. Inside, two men sat in the amber glow of the dying flames, separated by 56 years of life, but bound by blood and something deeper. Tommy Stone, 19 years old, sat rigid in the old wooden chair his grandfather had made 3 decades before. His army uniform, still crisp and new, felt too tight around the collar. The boots beside the door gleamed with fresh polish, not yet broken in, not yet touched by the mud of distant battlefields. In 12 hours, he would board a bus to Fort Carson. From there, a train to San Francisco. From there, a ship to Korea. From there, maybe home. Maybe not. Caleb Stone, 75, watched his grandson from across the small room. White hair fell past his shoulders, tied back with a strip of leather. His face was weathered like the canyon walls, carved deep with lines that spoke of wind and sun and years spent where the air grew thin. But his eyes, gray as morning mist, remained sharp as the day he'd first climbed these mountains as a young man. Two rifles hung above the door, polished and oiled, ready but unused for years. On the mantel, a photograph showed a younger Caleb beside a woman in a nun's habit, a red-haired boy between them. Next to it, another photo, older, the edges worn soft by handling. A dark-haired woman and a blonde child, both smiling at something beyond the frame. Caleb poured whiskey into 2 glasses, the liquid catching the firelight. He passed one to Tommy, then settled back into his chair with the slow deliberation of a man who had learned patience from stones and trees. "You scared Tommy?" The question hung in the air between them. Tommy swallowed his Adam's apple, bobbing above the stiff collar. His hands gripped the glass too tight. "Yes, sir. But I have to go. It's my duty." Caleb nodded slowly, his gaze distant, seeing something beyond the cabin walls. Duty, honor, big words for heavy decisions. He was quiet for a long moment, the only sound the soft pop and hiss of the fire. "You know why I never told you about the war?" Tommy straightened slightly. "Because you didn't serve Grandpa. You stayed here in the mountains." "Not exactly." Caleb took a slow sip of whiskey, let it burn down his throat. "There are kinds of war that don't happen on battlefields, Tommy, and there are lessons about courage you need to hear before you leave." The young man leaned forward, attention sharpening. "I'm going to tell you about the fall of 1918. I was 43 years old. I thought I'd died inside years before that, until a nun and a boy reminded me of something." "What, Grandpa?" Caleb's eyes met his grandson's, holding them with the weight of hard-earned truth. "That sometimes honor isn't about dying for someone. It's about living long enough to protect them." The old man turned his gaze to the fire, and his voice shifted, taking on the cadence of story of memory made present through words. It started with a storm. 6 years earlier, winter 1912, snow fell thick and heavy on the small cabin tucked into the mountainside 8 miles from anywhere. Inside, warmth and light, a woman's laughter, a child's endless questions. Sarah Stone, 32, hair the color of rich earth, sat by the fire teaching their daughter to read. The book was worn pages soft from handling, but the words inside still held their magic. Emma Stone, 7 years old, blonde curls catching the firelight, pressed close to her mother's side. "When will Papa come home?" Sarah smiled, but worry touched the corners of her eyes. "Soon, sweetheart. He's hunting. He'll be back before you know it." Outside, fog thick as wool blanketed the forest. 2 miles from the cabin, Caleb Stone, 37 years old, then his body still young and strong, tracked elk through the timber. He moved silent as smoke rifle ready, reading the forest the way other men read books. The elk's trail led him deeper into the white maze of snow and pine. He was focused, intent, thinking of the meat that would feed his family through the coming months. He didn't hear it at first. The sound was too far, too faint, swallowed by snow and distance. Then it came again. A scream, Sarah's voice, Emma's voice. Time collapsed into nightmare. Caleb ran as hard, a hammer in his chest, lungs burning in the frozen air. Branches tore at his face. Snow grabbed at his boots. 2 miles became 200, 2,000. When he broke through the trees, his world was ending in fire. The cabin, their home, was a pillar of flame that clawed at the dark sky. Black smoke poured from every opening. The heat hit him like a fist, drove him back, but he charged forward anyway into the inferno, into hell itself, Dutch Keller's gang. 5 men, hardened outlaws who'd robbed a bank in town and needed a place to hide. They'd thought the cabin empty had broken in looking for shelter. But Sarah and Emma were home, and witnesses couldn't be allowed to live. Caleb found Emma first. She lay in the snow where he'd dragged her from the flames. Her small body burned, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Her nightgown was black with char, her blonde hair singed. Her skin. He couldn't think about her skin. Papa. The word was barely a whisper, barely a breath. I'm scared. Caleb gathered her into his arms gentle, as holding smoke tears streaming down his face. I'm here, baby girl. Papa's here. It hurts. I know, I'm so sorry. Her small hand found his face, touched his cheek with fingers that trembled. Don't cry, Papa. Don't be sad. Emma. His voice broke completely. Please, please hold on. But even as he spoke, he felt her slip away, felt the light leave her body like warmth draining into cold ground. She died in his arms while the cabin that had been their home collapsed into embers behind them. Sarah was already gone. He found her later after Emma in what had been their bedroom. The door had been barred from outside. She'd never had a chance. Caleb Stone buried his wife and daughter on the hillside above the burned cabin, placed 2 stones to mark the graves, and something inside him died there too, something that wouldn't resurrect for 6 long years. Tommy's voice broke the spell of memory. Grandpa, I never knew. You never told anyone. Caleb's eyes were wet in the firelight. Never could, but you need to know, to understand the rest of the story. He took another drink, gathering himself, then continued. 6 years later, fall 1918, Caleb was 43 now. His hair shot through with gray he hadn't earned through age but through loss. He lived alone in a new cabin, smaller, simpler, 8 miles from the town of Silver Point, Colorado. A mining town, a place he visited once a month to trade furs for bullets and salt and flour. People called him a ghost, not to his face, but he heard the whispers, the mountain man who didn't speak, who lived like a hermit, who had died inside years ago but his body hadn't gotten the message. Every morning the same ritual. Walk to the 2 graves, place a stone on each, count the days. Sarah, Emma, day 2191. His life had become a calendar of loss. Each sunrise, another mark. Each sunset, another stone. He trapped beaver and marten, tanned hides, hunted elk, spoke maybe 20 words a day, and most of those were to his mule Moses. The cabin held 1 chair, 1 plate, 1 cup. No decorations, no color. Just raw wood and the smell of wood smoke and the silence of a man who had nothing left to say. He told himself this was his punishment, this isolation, this half-life. He'd failed to protect them, failed to be there when they needed him most. So he didn't deserve warmth, didn't deserve company, didn't deserve to live really, except that dying felt like taking the easy way out. So he existed, waiting for the day when his body would finally catch up to his already dead heart. Then September came, and with it, a storm that would change everything. 8 miles away in the town of Silver Point, Sister Margaret Hayes knelt in the small chapel attached to St. Mary's Orphanage. 28 years old, she'd been a nun with the Sisters of Charity for 5 years now. Her blonde hair, cut short, was hidden beneath her veil. Her green eyes, once bright with faith, now carried shadows that faith alone couldn't dispel. She'd come to the church seeking purpose after losing everything. Her parents to cholera when she was 16, her younger brother Peter to a factory accident a year later. At 17, she'd been alone in the world, drowning in questions that had no answers. Why did good people suffer? Why did God allow such pain? What was the point of any of it? She'd found no answers, but she'd found work, service, the orphanage, 30 children who needed her. That had been enough. For 5 years it had been enough, until tonight. Sister Maggie finished her prayers and rose from the hard wooden kneeler. Her knees ached. Everything ached lately. She was tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix, but there were still papers to grade, lessons to prepare for tomorrow. She walked quietly through the dark hallways of the orphanage, past rooms where children slept, toward the small office she used for her teaching work. Light showed under Mother Superior's door. Voices inside. She walked past, not meaning to eavesdrop, but sound carried in these old buildings. A man's voice. Smooth, cultured, familiar. The boy will be 7 in 2 weeks, Mother Judith. According to his father's will, that's when the inheritance becomes complicated. Victor Ashford. Maggie knew that voice. Everyone in Silver Point knew Victor Ashford. He owned 3 mines in the territory, employed half the town, donated generously to the church. A pillar of the community. A gentleman. Mother Superior's voice carefully neutral. What would you have us do, Mr. Ashford? Keep him safe here. Protected. I'll double my donations to the orphanage. The words were generous, protective, but something in the tone made Maggie's skin crawl. She pressed closer to the door, holding her breath. After Victor left, Maggie watched through a crack in the curtain as he met 2 men outside the gate. Rough men. Hired men. She recognized the type. Silver Point drew all kinds to its silver mines. One was tall, lean, with eyes like a hunting cat. Luke Garrett. She'd heard the name in town. A tracker. A man who found things people wanted found. A man who made things disappear when people wanted them disappeared. The other was broader, with the look of someone uncomfortable with the work he'd been hired to do. Frank Miller. Newer to town. Quieter. Victor's voice carried on the night air. 2 weeks, on the boy's birthday. Make it look like an accident. $500 each. Luke smiled, the expression cold and businesslike. A 6-year-old easy money. Frank hesitated. Boss, that's a child. That's $500. You have a daughter who needs food and schooling, don't you, Miller? Frank's shoulders slumped. After a moment, he nodded. Maggie stood frozen in the darkness, her mind racing. They were going to kill Danny, kill a 6-year-old boy for money, for inheritance, for a mine. Danny Walsh, red hair, freckles, eyes that never quite lost their sadness since his father died 3 months ago in a mining accident. A smart boy, a kind boy, a boy who trusted the adults around him to keep him safe. And tomorrow or the next day or the day after that, Victor Ashford would have him killed. The realization hit her like ice water. She couldn't go to the sheriff. Sheriff Cooper took money from Victor. She couldn't go to the judge. Judge Morrison dined at Victor's house every week. She couldn't even go to Father Patrick. The church depended on Victor's donations to keep the orphanage running. If Danny stayed here, he would die, which meant she had to get him out. But where house she had no money, no family, no connections outside this town. The church was her whole world. The orphanage, these children, her vows, her vows. She looked down at the simple silver cross hanging around her neck. Poverty, chastity, obedience, obedience. She'd sworn to obey the church, the Mother Superior, the rules of the order. But there was an older vow, wasn't there? A deeper one. To protect the innocent, to defend the defenseless, to stand between wolves and lambs. If keeping her vows meant letting Danny die, then the vows weren't worth keeping. The decision settled into her bones like ice crystallizing into certainty. She would break every rule, steal food and supplies from the church, disobey Mother Superior's authority, run away in the night. She would save Danny Walsh, or die trying. Midnight. Maggie moved through the orphanage like a ghost packing a small bag. Bread, dried meat, a blanket, a canteen, medical supplies. Not much, just what she could carry quickly. She woke Danny gently, her hand over his mouth so he wouldn't cry out in surprise. Sister Maggie. His voice was foggy with sleep, confused. Hush, sweetheart, we need to go. Right now, can you get dressed very quietly? Why, what's wrong? How could she explain? How could she tell a 6-year-old that his uncle wanted him dead, that the world was full of men who killed children for money? We're going somewhere safe, Danny, but we have to hurry. The boy's eyes widened, but he nodded. He was used to trusting her, used to obeying. Within minutes, he was dressed, his small hand clutching hers as they crept through the dark hallways. They slipped out the back door into the night, into the unknown. Behind them, a light came on in Mother Superior's window. Maggie saw it, glanced back once. Mother Judah stood there, a silhouette against the lamplight, watching them leave. She didn't call out, didn't raise an alarm, just watched. Did she know? Had she heard Victor's plan and chosen this silent permission for Maggie to run? Or was it coincidence there was no time to find out? Maggie pulled Danny close and walked into the darkness, heading toward the mountains, toward anywhere that wasn't here. Behind them, Silver Point slept, unaware that the nun and the orphan were gone. Dawn came cold and gray. Maggie and Danny had walked through the night following the old mining road until it turned to trail, until the trail turned to nothing but forest and stone. The town was far behind now, invisible behind ridges and trees, but so was any sense of direction. Maggie had grown up in Boston, spent 5 years in the small town of Silver Point. She knew nothing about surviving in wilderness, nothing about navigation without roads, nothing about the mountains that loomed around them, beautiful and deadly. Danny stumbled, his small legs exhausted. "Sister Maggie, I'm tired." "I know, sweetheart, just a little further." But further to where she had no destination, no plan beyond a way. They stopped beside a small creek. Danny drank from cupped hands while Maggie looked around trying to get her bearings. The sun was rising somewhere behind thick clouds. East-west, she couldn't tell. Danny's forehead felt warm under her palm. Fever. From exertion, from cold, from stress. She pulled the blanket tighter around his shoulders, but it wasn't enough. They needed shelter. Fire. Help. She closed her eyes and prayed for the first time in hours. Not the formal prayers of the liturgy, something rawer, more desperate. "Please, God, please, I've broken my vows, stolen from the church, run away in the night. If you want to punish me, fine. Punish me, but please don't let this child die. Send help, not for me, for Danny." The creek babbled its answer. The wind whispered through pine branches. Otherwise silence. Then a sound, soft, almost inaudible. The snap of a twig. Maggie's eyes flew open. She pulled Danny closer, heart suddenly pounding. Someone was there, in the trees, watching. A figure emerged from the shadows 15 feet away. A man, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in worn buckskin and furs, long hair tied back, a rifle slung over one shoulder. His face was weathered, heavily bearded, impossible to read. He stood absolutely still, watching them with eyes the color of smoke. Maggie's first instinct was to run. But Danny was too tired, too weak. They'd never outrun a man who knew these mountains. Her second instinct was to beg. "Please." Her voice came out steady despite the terror flooding her veins. "Please don't hurt us." The man said nothing, didn't move, just stood there studying them with an intensity that felt like being weighed and measured. Maggie tried again. "There are men chasing us, bad men. They want to kill this boy. We need help." Still nothing. The silence stretched until it felt like a physical thing, heavy and suffocating. Danny pressed against her side, trembling. "Sister Maggie, I'm scared." "I know, baby, I know." The man's eyes shifted to Danny, studied the boy. Something flickered across his face, too quick to read. Pain recognition. Memory. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough, like it hadn't been used in a long time. Like rusty hinges forced open. "How many men?" 3 words. The first words he'd spoken in 6 years to a stranger. But Maggie didn't know that. She only knew that he'd spoken at all, which meant he might help. "I don't know. Their leader is Victor Ashford, the mine owner. Yes, he wants to kill Danny for inheritance, for money." The man looked at Danny again. The boy stared back, frightened but trying to be brave. 6 years old, red hair, freckles, blue eyes wide with fear. In Caleb's mind, another child overlaid the image. Blonde instead of red, 7 instead of 6. But the same fear, the same need for protection, the same need he'd failed to answer once before. The decision happened in the space between heartbeats. Wordless, absolute. "My cabin, 3 miles. Can the boy walk?" Relief flooded through Maggie so strongly her knees nearly buckled. "We'll manage. Thank you. Thank you so much." The man nodded once, then moved toward them with surprising gentleness. He knelt beside Danny, meeting the boy's eyes. "I'm going to carry you. That okay?" Danny looked to Maggie. She nodded. "It's okay, sweetheart." The man lifted Danny as if he weighed nothing, settling the boy against his chest. Danny's head drooped onto the stranger's shoulder, exhausted beyond fear. "Follow me. Stay close. Don't make noise." Maggie nodded and fell into step behind him as he led them deeper into the forest. She didn't know his name yet, didn't know his story, didn't know that he'd been dead inside for 6 years, waiting for a reason to care about living again. She just knew that for the first time since fleeing the orphanage, Danny was safe, at least for now. The cabin appeared like something from a half-remembered dream. Tucked into a fold of the mountain, surrounded by pine and aspen, it was small and weathered but solid. Smoke rose from a stone chimney. A small barn leaned nearby, and Maggie caught a glimpse of a mule watching them with mild curiosity. Behind the cabin, she saw two graves, simple wooden markers. The sight made her stomach clench with understanding. This man knew loss too. He carried Danny inside and laid him gently on one of two beds. The cabin was sparse. One room, a fireplace, a table with a single chair, rifles above the door, furs hanging from the walls. No decoration, no softness. The home of someone who'd forgotten how to live and only remembered how to survive. The man built up the fire without speaking, his movements efficient and practiced. He brought water, dried venison, a blanket, set them beside Maggie without meeting her eyes. She tended to Danny, checking his fever, giving him water, covering him with the blanket. The boy was asleep almost instantly, his small body finally relaxing into safety. When she looked up, the man was sitting by the door, rifle across his lap, staring out into the forest. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for helping us." He didn't respond, didn't even acknowledge that she'd spoken. "My name is Sister Margaret. Everyone calls me Maggie. This is Danny." A slight nod, nothing more. "What's your name?" Long silence. Then so quietly she almost missed it, "Caleb Stone." "Thank you, Mr. Stone. We won't stay long, just until Danny's stronger. Then we'll move on." Where the question surprised her. She hadn't expected him to ask, hadn't expected him to care. "I don't know yet. Just away. Somewhere Victor can't find us." Caleb was quiet for a long moment. "Then they'll track you here. Tomorrow, maybe sooner." Fear spiked through her. "What should we do?" "Run, north. Territorial line is 4 days. Once across Ashford has no jurisdiction. 4 days through the mountains with a 6-year-old. You have a better idea." She didn't. God help her, she didn't. "Will you help us?" Caleb looked at her, then really looked at her, and she saw depths of pain in those gray eyes that matched anything she'd ever felt. "I'll try." "Why, you don't know why? Someone needs help. That's reason enough." It was the answer of a good man, a man who'd been tested by fire and hadn't broken, just bent. Maggie felt something shift in her chest. Trust maybe, or hope, or both. "I'm grateful, Mr. Stone. More than I can say." He turned back to watching the forest. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be hard." Maggie lay down beside Danny, keeping the boy warm, listening to the crackle of the fire and the wind in the pines outside. Despite everything, despite the danger still hunting them, she felt safer than she had in months. In the chair by the door, Caleb kept watch. He wouldn't sleep. Hadn't really slept in 6 years. Just dozed with one eye open, always alert, always waiting for danger that might never come. But tonight, danger was coming. He could feel it. Voices woke Maggie in the deep part of night. Harsh, demanding, coming from outside the cabin. Caleb was already on his feet, rifle in hand. "Get Danny." "Back door, now." Maggie's heart hammered against her ribs. She scooped up the sleeping boy, who woke confused and frightened. "Caleb Stone." A man's voice rang out from the darkness beyond the cabin walls. "We know someone's in there. Send out the boy. Nobody needs to get hurt." Caleb moved to the window, peered out. Maggie saw his jaw tighten. 6 men, maybe 7. His voice was flat, professional. "They tracked you faster than I expected." "What do we do?" He looked at Danny, and she saw the war happening behind his eyes. The easy choice would be to hold them off while Maggie and Danny escaped out the back. Sacrifice himself, go down fighting. The old Caleb, the one who'd spent 6 years waiting to die, would have made that choice. But then Danny, frightened and confused, reached out and grabbed Caleb's hand. "Mr. Stone, please don't die. Please don't leave me alone." The small hand in his, the trust, the need. Emma's hand had felt like that, small, trusting, needing protection he'd failed to give. But he was here now, and this time he could choose different. "We go together," he said, and the decision felt like coming back to life after a long cold death. "All of us." He moved fast, packing supplies, ammunition, food, medical kit, gave Maggie his wife's old coat. "You'll need this. It gets colder higher up." Maggie touched the worn fabric, understanding what it meant that he'd give this to her. "Thank you." No time for more. The voices outside were getting louder, more insistent. Caleb fired a warning shot through the window. Back off, this is private property. Give us the boy's stone and we'll leave you be. That was Luke Garrett's voice, smooth and reasonable and utterly false. Victor Ashford just wants his nephew back safe. The boy stays with me, then we'll burn you out. The threat hit Caleb like a fist to the gut. Burn him out. The same way Dutch Keller had burned Sarah and Emma. History repeating. Nightmare made real again. Not this time. He turned to Maggie. When I start shooting, run. Straight back into the trees, north. Follow the creek. I'll catch up. Caleb. Go. He fired rapidly, strategically. Not aiming to kill, aiming at the horses, the ground near the men's feet, driving them back, creating chaos. In the confusion, Maggie ran with Danny in her arms, plunging into the dark forest. Behind them, Caleb kept firing until his rifle clicked empty. He grabbed his pack, took one last look at the cabin that had been his prison for 6 years, and ran. Luke Garrett's men were already setting torches to the wood. Flames caught, spread, consumed. The cabin where Caleb had mourned, where he'd punished himself, where he died inside. It burned, but Caleb Stone didn't look back. He was done with death, done with mourning, done with being ghost. He ran through the forest following the path Maggie and Danny had taken, and for the first time in 6 years, he ran towards something instead of away from it. He ran toward life. A mile into the trees, he found them. Maggie leaning against a boulder, gasping for breath. Danny in her arms, conscious but exhausted. You came back, Danny said, and the relief in his small voice nearly broke Caleb's heart. Said I would. Caleb took the boy from Maggie's tired arms. We need to keep moving. They'll track us come daylight. Where are we going? Maggie asked. North, to the territorial line, to safety. How long? 4 days if we're lucky, 5 if we're not. Maggie looked at Danny, then at the dark forest around them, then back at Caleb. Can we make it? Caleb met her eyes. In them he saw fear but also determination, courage, the same fierce protectiveness he'd seen in Sarah, the same refusal to give up that had kept him alive when he wanted to die. Yes, he said, and meant it. We'll make it. Together they disappeared into the mountain wilderness, 3 souls bound by necessity and something deeper. Behind them the cabin burned to ash. Ahead 4 days of brutal terrain and determined pursuit. But they would make it. Because this time Caleb Stone had something worth living for. And he would not fail again. Dawn broke cold and gray over the mountains. Caleb woke first, as he always did, his body trained by years of solitary survival to sleep light and wake at the first hint of danger. He'd found them shelter in a shallow overhang of rock, barely enough to keep the wind off, but better than nothing. Maggie and Danny still slept huddled together under the single blanket, their breath making small clouds in the frigid air. Caleb watched them for a moment, these 2 people who'd stumbled into his life and somehow pulled him back from the edge of permanent darkness. The woman brave beyond her understanding of what bravery cost. The boy carrying a burden no 6-year-old should have to carry. He rose silently and checked their surroundings. No tracks, no signs of pursuit. They'd gained a few hours, maybe half a day, if they were lucky. Luke Garrett was good, but even good trackers needed daylight to follow a trail. Caleb set 3 small snares near a rabbit run he'd spotted the night before. By the time Maggie stirred, he'd caught 2 rabbits, cleaned them, and had them roasting over a nearly smokeless fire built in a depression between rocks. Maggie sat up disoriented for a moment, then memory flooded back. She looked around quickly, relaxing only when she saw Danny still sleeping peacefully beside her. How long was I asleep? 3 hours? Maybe 4. You didn't sleep at all, Caleb shrugged. Don't need much. It was a lie. He needed sleep like any man, but he'd learned to function on almost none, and old habits ran deep. Danny woke to the smell of cooking meat. His eyes opened wide, the sadness in them momentarily replaced by simple hunger. Is that breakfast? Caleb almost smiled. Almost. Rabbit. Not fancy, but it'll keep you going. They ate in silence, the food disappearing quickly. When Danny had eaten his fill, Caleb began packing their meager supplies. From here to the territorial line, 4 days if we move fast, 5 if we're careful. But you're not used to the mountains, so figure 6. Maggie's face tightened with worry. They'll catch us in 6 days. Not if we're smart. They have horses. We have knowledge of terrain horses can't cross. He looked at Danny. And we have something they don't. What's that? A reason that matters more than money. The simple statement hung in the air. Maggie felt something warm unfold in her chest. This man, this ghost who'd lived alone for 6 years, understood what she was only beginning to grasp. That love was stronger than greed. That protecting the innocent mattered more than any amount of silver. Thank you, Mr. Stone. Caleb, just Caleb. They set out as the sun broke through the clouds, climbing higher into terrain that grew steadily more difficult. Pine gave way to aspen. Aspen gave way to bare rock and wind-twisted shrubs. The air thinned. Each breath required more effort. Danny struggled but didn't complain. Caleb noticed approved of the boy's quiet courage. You're doing good, Danny. Real good. The boy's face lit up at the praise. My papa said Walsh men don't complain. Your papa was right. He raised you well. They stopped at midday to rest. Danny sat on a fallen log, breathing hard, his small chest heaving. Caleb knelt beside him. I'm going to teach you something. How to walk quiet in the forest. Watch. He demonstrated placing each foot deliberately. Heel first on stone, not leaves. Testing weight before committing. Moving like water, like wind, like something that belonged to the forest rather than invaded it. Now you try. Danny stood mimicking Caleb's movements. His first attempts were clumsy, but the boy learned fast. Within minutes, he was moving quieter, more confidently. Like this, Caleb. Just like that, you're a natural. The boy beamed. It was the first real smile Maggie had seen on his face since his father died. She watched Caleb teaching Danny, saw the gentleness in the mountain man's rough hands, heard the patience in his gravelly voice. This was a man who'd been a father before, a good father, the kind who taught rather than commanded, who praised rather than criticized. You're good with children, she observed quietly. Caleb's expression clouded. Had a daughter once, Emma. She asked questions all the time, just like Danny. What happened to her? The words came slow, pulled from somewhere deep and painful. I wasn't there when she needed me. Maggie wanted to ask more to understand the full weight of whatever tragedy had carved those lines into his face. But she could see the wound was still raw even after 6 years. That's why you're helping us. It wasn't a question. Partly. And the other part? Caleb looked at Danny, who was practicing his quiet walking, concentrating fiercely on each step. The other part is sometimes doing right is reason enough. They walked until the sun began its descent, painting the high peaks in shades of amber and rose. Caleb found them shelter in a stand of ancient pines, their trunks thick enough to break the wind that had started to pick up as evening fell. No fire tonight, too risky. They ate dried venison and drank cold water from a nearby stream. Danny shivered despite the blankets. Tell me about your father, Caleb said, breaking the silence. Danny's face brightened even as tears gathered in his eyes. He was the best papa in the whole world. He worked in the mine, but not like the other men. He owned it. The lucky strike. He found it himself, just digging where nobody else thought to dig. Smart man. Yes, and he was fair. He paid the miners good wages. Mama said that's why everyone liked him. Your mama's not with you. Danny's face fell. She died when I was born. It was just me and Papa. Until the boy's voice broke. Caleb placed a hand on Danny's shoulder, gentle, grounding. It's okay to miss him. Missing someone means the love doesn't die. It lives right here. He touched Danny's chest over his heart. Danny nodded, tears streaming down his cheeks now. I don't want to forget him. You won't, ever, and he'd be proud of you. You're brave, Danny, braver than most grown men. The boy wiped his eyes, sat up straighter. Really? Really? Maggie watched this exchange, her own eyes wet. She saw it clearly now. Caleb was healing himself by healing Danny, teaching the boy the things he wished he'd taught his own daughter, being present in a way he hadn't been able to be before. Night fell completely. The temperature dropped further. They huddled together for warmth, Caleb on one side, Maggie on the other, Danny between them. Caleb, Danny's voice was small in the darkness. Yeah, are we going to be okay? Caleb didn't answer immediately, didn't offer false comfort or easy lies. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of truth. I'm going to do everything I can to keep you safe. Both of you. That's a promise. You won't leave us. The question struck deep. Emma had asked him not to leave that last day before he'd gone hunting. He'd promised to come back, and he had come back. Just too late. No, he said, and felt the promise settle into his bones like an oath carved in stone. I won't leave you. Danny's breathing evened out as sleep claimed him. Maggie remained awake, acutely aware of Caleb's presence just inches away in the darkness. Thank you, she whispered. For being kind to him, he's been so scared since his father died. He's handling it better than most would. Because of you, you're giving him something to hold on to. Caleb was quiet for a long time, then so softly she almost missed it. Maybe he's giving me something too. Before Maggie could respond, before she could ask what he meant, Caleb spoke again. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be harder. She wanted to say more, wanted to understand this complicated man who'd saved them, who carried his own grief like a stone he couldn't put down. But exhaustion pulled at her, and sleep came despite her intentions. In the darkness, Caleb kept watch as he always did. But for the first time in 6 years, he wasn't just waiting for death. He was protecting life. And it made all the difference. Day 2 dawned with a sky the color of old pewter. The air tasted like coming snow, though it was only September. This high in the mountains weather followed its own calendar. They climbed steadily through terrain that grew progressively rougher. Loose scree made every step treacherous. Danny tired quickly, his small legs struggling with the steep grade. Caleb noticed, said nothing, simply lifted the boy onto his shoulders without breaking stride. I can walk, Danny protested, but without much conviction. Save your strength, you'll need it later. From his perch, Danny had a view of the world Caleb saw. Mountains stretching in every direction like frozen waves, eagles riding thermals far below them. The vast indifferent beauty of wilderness that cared nothing for human struggles. It's so big, Danny breathed. That's why men get lost up here. They forget how small they are. Are we lost? No, I know these mountains like I know my own hands. How long have you lived here? 30 years. Came when I was about as old as Sister Maggie. Danny craned his neck to look down at Caleb's weathered face. You must know everything about the mountains. Not everything. Mountains always have secrets, but I know enough to keep us alive. They stopped at noon to rest and eat. Maggie's feet were blistered despite her sturdy boots. She said nothing, but Caleb noticed the slight limp, the way she winced when she thought no one was looking. Let me see your feet. I'm fine, let me see them anyway. Reluctantly, Maggie removed her boots. The blisters were angry, and red, some already burst in weeping. Caleb went to work with quiet efficiency. He packed the worst blisters with moss, wrapped her feet in strips of cloth from his pack, adjusted the fit of her boots with careful precision. You should have said something earlier. We don't have time to slow down for my comfort. We have time to keep you able to walk. His hands were gentle, careful not to cause unnecessary pain. Maggie found herself acutely aware of his touch, of the competence in those scarred, weathered hands. Where did you learn all this? The tracking, the survival skills, the medicine? My father taught me some. The mountains taught me the rest. You learn quick up here. The ones who don't learn don't survive. What brought you to the mountains in the first place? Caleb's hand stilled for a moment. Looking for something. Did you find it? Found a life, lost it. Now I'm not sure what I'm looking for anymore. He finished wrapping her feet, sat back. That'll hold for today, but tomorrow we need to slow down, let them heal proper. We can't slow down, they're behind us. They're always going to be behind us. But if you can't walk, we stop anyway. Better to rest now than collapse later. The wisdom in his words was undeniable. Maggie nodded, grateful for his practicality, even as worry gnawed at her. As the afternoon wore on, Danny began asking his endless questions again. Caleb answered each one with the patience of someone who'd once treasured a child's curiosity. Why do trees grow crooked up here? Wind, it bends them when they're young, shapes them as they grow. What do bears eat? Everything. Berries, fish, roots, meat when they can get it. Bears aren't picky. Can you talk to animals? This one made Caleb pause. Not talk, but I can read them. Watch how they move, what they're afraid of, what they want. That's a kind of conversation. Maggie listened, recognizing something she hadn't expected. Caleb might claim to have died inside 6 years ago, but there was life in him still. It showed in these small moments, in his teaching, in his patience with Danny's questions. Whatever had broken him, it hadn't broken him completely. As evening approached, the temperature began to drop rapidly. Caleb found them shelter in a narrow cave barely large enough for the three of them, but protected from the wind that had begun to howl outside. Storm coming, big one. In September. Mountains make their own weather. Could be snow, could be just cold rain. Either way, we stay put until it passes. Danny was shivering already, his small body not built for this kind of cold. Caleb made the decision quickly. They needed fire risk or no risk. He built it small, deep in the cave, where the smoke would be dispersed by the wind before anyone could see it. The warmth was immediate and blessed. They huddled close to the flames as the storm hit with sudden violence. Rain turned to sleet, then to wet, heavy snow. The temperature plummeted. Danny's shivering grew worse despite the fire, despite the blankets. His teeth chattered. His lips took on a bluish tinge. Maggie recognized the signs. Hypothermia. He needs to warm up, now. The fire alone wasn't enough. The cave, for all its shelter, was still exposed to the brutal cold seeping in from outside. Caleb knew what had to be done. Had done it before in emergencies with injured trappers and men caught in blizzards. Body heat. We need to share warmth. He removed his outer coat, pulled Danny against his chest. The boy was ice cold, his small body trembling violently. Maggie, you too. Other side. She hesitated only a moment. Her vows, her training, all of it screamed against such intimate contact with a man. But Danny's life hung in the balance, and rules meant nothing against that. She removed her outer layer and pressed against Danny's other side, sandwiching the boy between them. The three of them lay there, sharing warmth, sharing breath, keeping death at bay, through the simple animal comfort of human contact. Danny's shivering slowly subsided. Color returned to his lips. His breathing evened out. But he was delirious, caught between sleep and waking, between present and past. Papa, he mumbled, his voice weak and distant. Papa, don't leave me. Please don't go. Caleb felt the words like a knife between his ribs. Emma had said the same thing, exactly the same thing in those last moments. Without thinking, without choosing, he held Danny tighter and spoke the words he'd never got on to say to his own daughter. I'm here, son. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. Danny settled against him, soothed by the voice, by the presence, by the promise. Maggie heard it, heard Caleb call Danny son, heard the breaking and the healing happening simultaneously in that one word. Tears slid down her face, silent and hot. Hours passed. The storm raged outside. Inside the cave, three people lay pressed together, surviving, protecting each other from cold and loss and the infinite loneliness of the world. Caleb had spent 6 years alone, punishing himself, believing he deserved nothing but isolation and regret. Now, holding this child who wasn't his, feeling the warmth of the woman beside him, he realized something profound. He didn't want to be alone anymore. The wanting terrified him, because wanting meant caring. And caring meant the possibility of loss, of failing again, of watching someone he loved die while he stood helpless. But Danny's small hand clutched his shirt, trusting, needing. And Maggie's breathing synchronized with his own close enough that he could feel her heart beating. For the first time since Sarah and Emma died, Caleb Stone wanted something. He wanted this fragile, temporary family, this purpose, this life. Morning came eventually, as it always did. The storm had passed, leaving the world transformed. Everything was white and clean and new. Danny woke warm and healthy, the fever broken, the danger past. You saved me, he said, looking up at Caleb with absolute trust. We saved each other, Caleb replied, and meant it more than the boy could understand. They emerged from the cave into a landscape of pristine snow and brilliant sunshine. Beautiful, deadly, slowing them down significantly. But they were alive. And for now, that was enough. So, while Caleb and his unlikely family climbed higher into the mountains, Luke Garrett's hunting party closed the distance behind them. 6 men now instead of 7, riding hard, following tracks that were increasingly difficult to read in the fresh snow. Luke sat tall in his saddle, his hunter's eyes scanning the terrain ahead. Beside him, Frank Miller rode in uncomfortable silence. Frank had been having second thoughts since they left the burning cabin. Second thoughts that grew stronger with each mile, each hour, each moment. He thought about the boy they were hunting. He had a daughter back in Denver. Lucy, 7 years old with red hair, like Danny Walsh, and a gap-toothed smile that could light up a room. Frank had taken this because Lucy needed food, needed shoes, needed a roof over her head. But what kind of father killed another man's child to feed his own? The question gnawed at him like a rat in his chest. They're slowing down, Luke observed, studying the tracks. Woman's not used to this terrain. The kid's too young. Give it another day, we'll have them. One of the other men, a scarred brute named Hayes, grinned. $500. Easy money for putting down a brat. Frank's jaw tightened. He's 6 years old. He's $500 with legs, Hayes replied. Don't matter what age. Luke shot Frank a sharp look. You got a problem, Miller. No problem, just saying killing a kid that's crossing a line. You knew the job when you took it. Victor wants the boy dead. We get paid. Simple. But it wasn't simple. Nothing about this was simple. That night they made camp in a sheltered hollow. Luke set watches and planned the next day's route. Frank volunteered for last watch, the coldest and least desirable shift. Luke accepted without suspicion. At 4 in the morning, with the others asleep, Frank made his decision. He studied the tracks they'd been following, saw where Caleb had deliberately led them over hard stone to make the trail harder to read, saw where he'd doubled back to confuse pursuers. Smart. The mountain man knew what he was doing. Frank took a stick and deliberately scraped away part of the trail marking, making it look like the wind had done it. Then he built a small cairn of stones pointing west away from the actual path north. It wouldn't fool Luke for long. The man was too good a tracker. But it might buy Caleb and the others half a day, maybe more if Frank played it right. When Luke woke and found the confused trail, he cursed viciously. They went west, had to. Look at these stones, they're marking the path. Frank said nothing, just nodded and followed as Luke led them in the wrong direction. By midday, Luke realized the deception. The tracks didn't continue west. They'd been deliberately misled. He wheeled his horse around, eyes blazing, and looked directly at Frank. You did this. It wasn't a question. Frank met his gaze steadily. Don't know what you're talking about. You covered their trail, built that cairn, led us the wrong way. The other men were watching now, hands drifting toward weapons. Frank had a choice. Lie and maybe get away with it, or tell the truth and face the consequences. He thought of Lucy, thought of Danny Walsh, thought of the kind of man he wanted to be when his daughter grew old enough to ask what he'd done in his life. Yeah, I did. Luke's hand dropped to his gun. Why, poem, because I've got a daughter about that boy's age, and I'm not going to kill a kid so you can get rich. Victor will kill you for this. Hell, I'll kill you for this. Frank's hand moved to his own weapon. Not fast, not threatening, just ready. Then do it, but you'll have to shoot me in the front because I'm not running. The standoff lasted 10 seconds. 10 seconds that felt like 10 hours. Then Luke smiled, and it was the coldest expression Frank had ever seen. I'm not going to kill you, Miller. I'm going to tell Victor what you did. Let him handle you, but you're done here. Get out. If I see you again, you're dead. Frank dismounted slowly, keeping his hands visible, non-threatening. He took his rifle, his pack, nothing more. The boy doesn't deserve to die, he said. Neither does the nun or the mountain man. You're hunting good people for bad money. I'm hunting a payday. That's all I hunt. Frank looked at each of the men in turn, saw nothing but greed and indifference. These weren't men anymore, just predators in human form. Then God help you when the reckoning comes. He turned and walked away, heading back towards Silver Point, toward whatever consequences waited there. Behind him, Luke reorganized his remaining men and turned north again, following the real trail, now closing the distance. Frank Miller didn't look back. He'd made his choice. For the first time in a long time, he'd done something that might make his daughter proud. It would probably cost him everything, but some prices were worth paying. Caleb felt the change before he saw it. The back of his neck prickled. The forest went too quiet. Birds stopped singing. They were being watched. He held up a hand, stopping Maggie and Danny. Get down, behind those rocks. Don't make a sound. Maggie obeyed instantly, pulling Danny with her. They crouched behind a tumble of boulders, hearts pounding. Caleb scanned the terrain. They'd entered a narrow canyon, high walls on either side. Perfect place for an ambush. And he'd walked right into it like an amateur. 6 years of isolation had made him rusty. The first shot kicked up dirt 3 feet to his left. Caleb Stone, Luke Garrett's voice echoed off the canyon walls. End of the line. Give us the boy, walk away with your life. Caleb dove behind cover, pulling his rifle around. 5 men that he could see positioned on both sides of the canyon. Good placement, professional. They had him pinned. The boy stays with me, he shouted back. Then you die here, your choice. Caleb fired twice, forcing 2 of the men to duck. But he was outgunned, outmanned, and rapidly running out of options. He had maybe 20 rounds left. They had hundreds. The math was simple and brutal. He looked back at Maggie and Danny, saw the terror in their eyes. The trust, too. They believed he'd protect them, just like Emma had believed. And he'd failed Emma. Maggie, he called quietly, when I start shooting, you run. North, follow the creek bed. Don't stop. What about you? I'll hold them as long as I can. Caleb, no, we go together. There's no way out for me, but you and Danny can make it. Danny's voice small and frightened. Caleb, please don't die. Please. The same words Emma had said. The same plea he'd been unable to answer. Caleb was preparing to make his last stand to die protecting these two, the way he'd failed to die protecting Sarah and Emma when the unexpected happened. A gunshot rang out from behind Luke's position. One of Luke's men dropped, clutching his shoulder, screaming. Everyone froze, confused. Then Frank Miller's voice rang out strong and clear. I can't let you kill that boy. I won't. Luke spun, fury and disbelief mixing on his face. Miller, you're a dead man. Maybe, but you're not killing that kid. Chaos erupted. Luke's men were caught between 2 threats now, Caleb in front and Frank behind. Luke screamed orders, trying to reorganize, but his tactical advantage had evaporated. Caleb didn't hesitate. He fired rapidly, precisely driving Luke's men into cover. Not aiming to kill, aiming to wound, to panic, to scatter. Frank kept firing from his position, forcing Luke to retreat or die. In the confusion, Caleb grabbed Maggie and Danny. Run now. They fled through the canyon as bullets whined and ricocheted around them. Behind the firefight continued Frank Miller, buying them precious seconds with his own life. They ran until the gunfire faded, until Caleb was sure they weren't being followed. Then they collapsed in a sheltered hollow, gasping for breath. Who was that? Maggie asked. The man who helped us. One of Luke's men. Don't know why he turned. But Caleb understood in a way. Sometimes a man reached a line he couldn't cross. Sometimes conscience woke up at the last minute. Sometimes people surprised you. Danny clung to Caleb, shaking. I thought you were going to die. Not today, son. Not today. But the close call had shaken Caleb more than he wanted to admit. In the moment of crisis, his first instinct had been to sacrifice himself. To die protecting others like he should have died protecting Sarah and Emma. The old pattern, the old guilt. He had to be better than that. Had to live, not just die well. Because Danny needed him, Maggie needed him, and maybe, just maybe, he needed them too. They walked until dark, putting distance between themselves and Luke's men. Caleb found shelter in a grove of ancient pines, their trunks thick enough to hide behind if needed. No fire, too dangerous. They ate cold venison and drank water from a nearby stream. Danny fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted by fear and exertion. Maggie tended to Caleb's injuries. In the firefight, a bullet had grazed his side, not deep but bleeding steadily. She cleaned the wound with water, tore strips from her undergarments to bind it. Her hands were gentle but sure, the touch of someone who'd done this before, caring for sick children at the orphanage. You were going to stay behind, she said quietly. You were going to mass so we could escape. Seemed like the only option. It was the coward's option. The words stung because they were true. Caleb looked at her sharply. Dying to protect you is cowardly. Dying is easy. Living is hard. Staying alive to keep protecting us, that takes real courage. Her hands stilled on his ribs. They were close, closer than propriety allowed. Her fingers on his bare skin, his breath warm on her face. I'm not good at staying alive, he admitted. Been trying to die for 6 years. I know, I can see it in you, the death wish. Then you understand why I am the way I am. I understand you're afraid of living, of caring, of failing again. She was right. God help him, she was right. What if I fail you? What if Danny dies because I make a mistake? What if you succeed? What if we all survive because you're there? The possibility seemed impossible, foreign, but her eyes held his and he saw something there that terrified him more than any bullet. Hope. Maggie, I need to tell you something. About Emma, about why she died. You don't have to. I do, because if you're going to trust me, you need to know the truth. And so in the darkness with Danny sleeping peacefully nearby, Caleb told her the whole story. Not just that he'd been gone when Dutch Keller came, but that he'd led Keller there. That he'd witnessed the bank robbery, been followed. That he'd thought he'd lost them, but hadn't checked carefully enough. I brought death to my door. Then I left it unlocked and walked away. So you see, it wasn't just bad luck, it was my fault. Maggie was quiet for a long time. Caleb waited for her to pull away, to realize he was too broken, too dangerous, too cursed to be trusted. Instead, she asked, "Did you know they were following you?" "No, but I should have." Should have been perfect, should have been, well, the same thing she'd said before, but now it hit harder. I should have protected them. You're a human being, Caleb. Human beings make mistakes. You didn't kill Emma. Dutch Keller killed Emma. You were just a man who made an error in judgment. We all make those. Some errors cost more than others. Yes, they do, and you've paid for yours every day for 6 years. When does the debt get settled? When do you forgive yourself? I don't know if I can. Maggie's hand covered his, warm and solid and real. Then let me help you learn how. Before either could say more, a sound in the darkness. Rustling, movement. Caleb's hand went to his rifle. Stay here, Bafbaum. He crept to the edge of their camp, every sense alert. Ivata. Something was out there. Something big. Then he saw the eyes, reflecting firelight that wasn't there. Yellow, predatory, mountain lion, drawn by the smell of blood from his wound. Hungry, hunting. Caleb raised his rifle slowly. The big cat crouched, muscles coiling. 20 feet away. Too close. It sprang. Caleb fired, missed in the darkness. The lion was airborne, claws extended, aiming for his throat. Then Maggie's voice screaming, "No!" She threw herself between them. The lion's trajectory couldn't change midair. Its claws raked across her arm instead of Caleb's throat. She went down hard, crying out in pain. Caleb's second shot was true. The lion dropped dead before it hit the ground. But Maggie was bleeding. Deep claw marks from shoulder to elbow. 4 parallel gashes, red and angry. Why did you do that? Caleb dropped beside her, his hands already working to stop the bleeding. Because I'm not losing you. You could have been killed. So could you. They stared at each other in the darkness, the intensity of what had just happened, crackling between them like lightning. Danny woke crying at the commotion. Caleb worked to calm the boy while tending Maggie's wounds. The cuts were deep but clean. They'd need stitches. This is going to hurt, he warned. I know. He worked by moonlight, his needle pulling thread through torn skin. Maggie bit down on a leather strap, tears streaming down her face, but she didn't cry out. When it was done, Caleb bandaged her arm with strips of clean cloth. His hands were shaking. You saved my life, he said. You've saved mine twice now. I'm just returning the favor. That's not how this works. Isn't it? Maggie's good hand found his face, touched his cheek. We save each other, Caleb. That's what people who care about each other do. People who care about each other. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning neither was quite ready to name. I haven't cared about anyone in 6 years, Caleb admitted. I know, but you care now. I can see it. What if caring about you gets you killed? What if not caring about me would have let that lion rip out your throat? She had him there. Danny, watching this exchange with the simple clarity of childhood, asked, Are you and Sister Maggie going to get married? Both adults froze. Danny, it's complicated, Maggie started. Why you love each other? I can tell. Out of the mouths of children. Caleb looked at Maggie. Maggie looked at Caleb. Something passed between them, unspoken but understood. It's complicated, Caleb agreed, but maybe not as complicated as we think. They settled down to rest, Danny between them again. Both adults too aware of each other to sleep easily. Maggie had risked her life for Caleb. had literally taken claws meant for him, and Caleb had finally told her his darkest secret, the guilt he'd carried for 6 years. And she hadn't run, hadn't condemned him, she'd forgiven him. More than that, she'd shown him that maybe, just maybe, he could forgive himself. The mountain lion's body lay outside the camp, already attracting scavengers. Tomorrow they'd need to move again. Luke Garrett would still be hunting them. The danger was far from over. But something had shifted. Some barrier between them had crumbled. They weren't just protector and protected anymore. They were three people who'd chosen each other. A family forged not in blood, but in fire and sacrifice, in the simple, profound act of caring. And that was worth fighting for, worth living for. Even if Caleb still didn't quite believe he deserved it. Day 4 broke with pain, etched in every movement. Maggie's arm throbbed beneath its bandages, the claw marks angry and hot. Caleb's side burned where the bullet had grazed him. Danny's fever had returned in the night his small body pushed beyond what it could endure. They were 15 miles from the territorial line. Might as well have been 100. Caleb assessed their situation with the cold practicality of a man who'd survived worse. They needed medicine. Real medicine, not herbs and hope. Danny needed rest in a real bed, not cold ground. Maggie needed a doctor to check her wounds for infection. They needed help. 5 miles south, according to his mental map, lay a small town. Redemption Falls, population maybe 200. Far enough from Silver Point that Victor's influence might not reach. Close enough to the territorial line that federal law held more weight than local corruption. It was a risk, but staying in the mountains was a guaranteed death sentence for all of them. We're going down, he decided, to Redemption Falls. Maggie looked at him with fever-bright eyes. Can we trust them? Don't know, but Danny needs a doctor. You need a doctor. We don't have a choice. They descended through pine forest, still heavy with morning mist. Each step was agony for Maggie, who'd lost blood and fought infection through the night. Caleb supported her with one arm, carried Danny with the other. The boy was light, too light, burning up with fever. Redemption Falls appeared through the trees like a mirage. A single street lined with wooden buildings, weathered gray by mountain winters. A church, a general store, a saloon, in blessed relief a sign hanging from a small building that read, Dr. William Harper, physician. They stumbled into the street. People stopped to stare. A mountain man, a nun in torn habit, a child unconscious in his arms. They made quite a picture. An older man rushed from the doctor's office. White hair, kind eyes behind wire spectacles, the look of someone who'd seen suffering and dedicated his life to fighting it. Good God, bring them inside quickly. Judder. William Harper, 58 years old, had been the town physician for 20 years. He'd seen plenty, but something about these three struck him deep. The desperation, the exhaustion, the way they clung to each other like survivors of a shipwreck. He got them into his clinic, a clean, well-ordered space that smelled of carbolic acid and dried herbs. Examined Danny first because the child was in worse shape. Pneumonia, early stages. He needs bed rest, medicine, and care. Immediately. Relief flooded through Caleb. Not too late. They'd gotten here in time. Harper moved to Maggie, next unwrapped her bandages. The claw marks were clean thanks to Caleb's wilderness medicine, but infection threatened at the edges. Mountain lion. Yes, Caleb confirmed. You did good work stitching her. Saved her arm, probably saved her life. But she needs proper antibiotics. Finally, Harper examined Caleb's bullet graze. Raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Men didn't get shot by accident in these mountains. As he worked, Harper kept glancing at Maggie's habit. Recognition slowly dawned. You're a nun. From where Maggie hesitated, looked to Caleb. Silver Point, Caleb said. St. Mary's Orphanage. Harper's hands stilled. He looked at Danny more carefully. Red hair, age 6, the timing. This is Danny Walsh. Not a question, a statement. Maggie nodded, too tired to lie. Harper set down his instruments, walked to the window, stood there for a long moment making a decision that would change everything. Victor Ashford put out a bounty, $1,000 for the bomb, $500 for information leading to his capture. Maggie's good hand clutched Caleb's arm. Are you going to turn us in? Harper turned back to face them. His eyes were wet. No. Why not? That's a lot of money. Because I know what Victor is. I was the doctor in Silver Point 3 years ago. treated Thomas Walsh after his mining accident. The old physician's voice grew heavy with guilt. Thomas told me someone had sabotaged the support beams, told me Victor wanted him dead for the mine. He begged me to tell the sheriff. Did you go in? Harper's shame was a palpable thing. No, I was afraid. Thomas died 2 days later before he could make a formal statement, and I convinced myself I'd imagined about it, that I'd misunderstood. He looked at Danny unconscious and innocent. I've lived with that cowardice for 3 years. Watched Victor take guardianship of this child knowing what he was, knowing what he'd do eventually. Harper straightened decision made. I won't fail again. The boy is safe here. I'll protect him. Caleb studied the doctor, saw genuine remorse, genuine determination. Victor has men. They'll come. Then we'll be ready. You're putting your whole town at risk. Then the town can decide. Word spread through Redemption Falls faster than fire through dry grass. By sundown, everyone knew. The nun, the mountain man, the orphan being hunted, the $1,000 bounty, the truth about Victor Ashford. Mayor Benjamin Thompson called an emergency town meeting. The small church filled to capacity. Arguments erupted before the meeting even officially started. Thompson, a nervous man who'd spent his life avoiding difficult decisions, banged his gavel for order. We have a situation. These people have brought danger to our town. Victor Ashford is a powerful man. If we harbor them, he could destroy us economically, close our trade routes, ruin our businesses. Sheriff Ben Wolf stood up, 45 years old, weathered by a lifetime of trying to be an honest lawman in a corrupt system. He'd failed more times than he'd succeeded, but he hadn't given up yet. That boy is innocent. If we hand him over, we're accomplices to murder. We don't know that, Thompson protested. Victor says the nun kidnapped him. The nun risked everything to save him. You think she did that for fun? The town split down predictable lines. Those with business ties to Silver Point wanted to turn them over. Those with consciences wanted to protect them. The argument raged, voices, rising tempers, flaring. Caleb sat in the back, Danny sleeping against his shoulder, Maggie beside him, both too exhausted to even follow the debate about their fate. Then the church doors opened. Father Patrick O'Brien entered his priest collar, stark white against his black cassock. 60 years old, gray hair, trembling hands. Everyone knew him. He'd been the priest in Silver Point for 20 years. Performed their weddings, baptized their children, buried their dead. And everyone knew Victor Ashford paid his salary. The room fell silent. Father Patrick walked slowly to the front of the church. His eyes found Maggie, and something passed between them. Understanding, forgiveness, solidarity. When he spoke, his voice shook, but the words were clear. I'm a coward. For 20 years, I've allowed Victor Ashford to control me with money, to control the church with his donations. I've watched him hurt people and said nothing, done nothing. He turned to face the assembled townspeople. But I will not let him murder a child. I will not stand silent while evil triumphs because good men do nothing. His voice grew stronger. Sister Margaret showed me what true faith looks like. She risked her vows, her safety, her life to protect an innocent. That is what I should have done months ago, years ago. He looked directly at Mayor Thompson. I stand with Sister Margaret. I stand with that child. And if this town has any decency left, you'll stand with them too. The effect was electric. Father Patrick, who'd never opposed Victor in his life, who'd taken his money and looked the other way, had finally found his courage. The vote, when it came, was 52 to 38. Redemption Falls would protect Danny Walsh. Victor Ashford could go to hell. That night, exhaustion finally caught up with all of them. Danny slept peacefully under Dr. Harper's care, his fever broken by proper medicine. Maggie's wounds were cleaned and rebandaged. Caleb's side was stitched properly. They'd made it. 4 days through hell, and they'd made it. Caleb and Maggie sat on the porch of the doctor's office, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. For the first time in days, they could breathe without looking over their shoulders. We did it, Maggie said softly. We got Danny to safety. Not yet. Victor will come. Men like him don't accept defeat. I know, but we have help now. We're not alone anymore. Caleb looked at her, really looked at her. Her face was pale, drawn with pain and exhaustion. Her nun's habit was torn and dirty. Her hair escaped its bindings in wild strands. She was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Maggie, when this is over, don't. Don't what? Don't say something we can't take back. Why not? She turned to face him, and her green eyes were full of things she couldn't say. Because I'm a nun. I took vows. Poverty, chastity, obedience to the church. You broke obedience to save Danny. That was different. How toi, because, she struggled for words, because I know how I feel about you, and it terrifies me. The confession hung between them like something fragile and precious. How do you feel? Like I want to break another vow. Caleb's breath caught. Which one? She didn't answer. Didn't need to. They both knew. After this is done, Caleb said carefully, I'll go back to the mountains, back to being alone. Why bush? Because that's what I deserve. That's not true. You saved me, Maggie, made me feel alive again, but I can't ask you to give up your calling for me. What if I wanted to? Before he could answer, the sound of horses, many horses, coming fast. They were here. Dawn had barely broken when Victor Ashford rode into Redemption Falls at the head of 12 armed men. He sat his horse like a prince surveying a conquered province, immaculate in a tailored suit despite days of hard riding. Legal papers were clutched in his gloved hand, custody documents bearing official seals, an arrest warrant for Sister Margaret signed by Sheriff Cooper of Silver Point. Everything looked proper. Everything was legal. That was Victor's genius. He always made evil look legitimate. Sheriff Wolf stepped into the street, 6 deputies behind him. The entire town was waking now, emerging from houses and businesses to watch. That's far enough, Ashford. Victor smiled, cold, confident. Sheriff Wolf, I'm here to retrieve my ward. Daniel Walsh, you're harboring a kidnapper. I'm harboring a child you tried to murder. Slander. Victor's voice remained calm, reasonable. I have legal custody granted by Judge Morrison in Silver Point. I have an arrest warrant for Sister Margaret Hayes signed by Sheriff Cooper. The law is entirely on my side. The law might be, justice isn't. Justice, Victor laughed. Justice is what men with power decide it is. I have the power here, Sheriff. Money, influence, legal documents. What do you have? A poor mining town that can't survive without trade agreements I control. It was true. Redemption Falls was small, vulnerable. Victor could strangle them economically, and they all knew it. Mayor Thompson stepped forward, sweating despite the cool morning air. Mr. Ashford, perhaps we can reach an arrangement. No arrangements. Sheriff Wolf cut him off. The boy stays. Victor's patience frayed visibly. Then you choose destruction. I'll cut off every trade route. Blacklist your merchants. Ensure no mine in the territory will hire your men. I will ruin this town. Better to be ruined than damned. The standoff hung there balanced on a knife edge. Victor's men spread out hands near weapons. Wolf's deputies did the same. 20 armed men in a small street, all it would take was one nervous trigger finger, and it would become a massacre. Then a new voice cut through the tension. Hold. An elderly woman stepped into the street. Late 60s, iron-gray hair, eyes sharp as broken glass. Judge Sarah Hendricks retired from the Territorial Circuit Court, but still carrying the authority of decades on the bench. Under territorial law, I can convene an emergency custody hearing. Right here. Right now. Victor's mask slipped, showing irritation beneath. This isn't legal. It's more legal than murder, Mr. Ashford. You want the boy prove in front of witnesses that you're a fit guardian. Victor's confidence returned. He had the law on his side, always did. Fine. I'm his uncle named legal guardian in his father's will. Sister Margaret kidnapped him from lawful custody. I demand his return. Judge Hendricks turned to Maggie, who stood on the doctor's porch with Caleb beside her. Sister Margaret, your defense. Maggie stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear. Victor Ashford murdered Thomas Walsh to steal his mine. I overheard him ordering Danny's assassination. I saved the boy's life. Serious accusations. Evidence. This was it. The moment everything would be decided. Dr. Harper stepped forward. I have evidence. He produced a worn medical journal, Thomas Walsh's dying declaration. He told me Victor sabotaged the mine. I documented it. I was too afraid to come forward then. Harper's voice broke. But I'm not afraid anymore. Victor waved it off. Hearsay, inadmissible. This is community justice, not a courtroom, Judge Hendricks replied. We'll hear it. Father Patrick came forward next. I have evidence too. Victor has been blackmailing church officials, controlling town politics through bribes. I have letters, records. Then to everyone's surprise, a new figure appeared. Frank Miller, limping, bandaged, but alive. He'd made it back, had been resting at the edge of town recovering. I have evidence, Frank said. Victor hired us to kill the boy. I'm willing to testify. This is the contract. Victor's signature. The cascade of testimony was devastating. Victor's facade cracked, but he played his final card. None of this matters. I have the law. He thrust forward the documents. Sheriff Cooper's warrant, Judge Morrison's custody papers, signed by a territorial judge. Legally, I have every right to that child. Judge Hendricks examined the papers. They were legitimate, official, properly executed. The law appears to be on your side, Mr. Ashford. Victor smiled, triumph gleaming in his eyes. However, the judge continued, there is an older law, natural law, the law that says we don't hand children to murderers regardless of what papers say. She tore the documents in half. This community has voted. Danny Walsh stays here under the protection of Redemption Falls until federal marshals arrive to conduct a proper investigation. You can't do that. I just did. Now leave before we arrest you for conspiracy to commit murder. Victor's face went purple with rage. For a moment, violence trembled in the air. His men outnumbered Wolf's deputies. They could take the town by force. But then more people emerged from buildings. Shopkeepers with rifles, miners with picks, women with shotguns. The entire town armed and determined. Victor wasn't just facing 6 deputies anymore. He was facing 200 angry citizens. This isn't over, he snarled. I'll be back with territorial authorities. With real lawmen, you'll all hang for this. He wheeled his horse around and rode out his men following. But Caleb, watching from the porch, knew better. Men like Victor didn't retreat. They regrouped. And when they came back, it would be with blood in mind. The celebration that followed was premature. Caleb knew it. Wolf knew it. But the townspeople needed to believe they'd won, if only for a moment. That night, while Redemption Falls feasted and drank and congratulated themselves, Caleb couldn't shake his unease. He'll come back, he told Wolf. Tonight, tomorrow, soon. We'll be ready. Will you? He's got nothing to lose now. The legal avenue failed. The only thing left is violence. Wolf's jaw tightened. Then violence it is. Caleb checked on Danny, who slept peacefully in Dr. Harper's care. The boy's color was better, his breathing easy. He looked like what he was, a 6-year-old child who should be worrying about schoolwork and playing with friends, not running for his life. Maggie found Caleb sitting outside the clinic, rifle across his knees, watching the darkness. You can't stay awake forever. Can for a while yet. She sat beside him, careful of her injured arm. What are you thinking about? Endings. How this one plays out. You think Victor will attack? I know he will. Question is when. They sat in companionable silence. The kind of silence that exists between people who've been through fire together, who don't need words to communicate. Caleb, can I ask you something? Anything. If we survive this, if Danny is safe, what happens then? I told you, I go back to the mountains. Alone. That's how I've always been. That's how you've been for 6 years. Doesn't mean that's how you have to be sound. Caleb looked at her. What are you saying? I'm saying I don't want to go back to the convent. I don't want to return to a life of obedience when I've learned what it means to choose, to act, to love. The last word hung between them, huge and terrifying and true. You're a nun. I was a nun. Now I'm a woman who saved a child, who found something she thought she'd never have. What's that? A family with you, with Danny. Caleb's breath caught. Maggie, I'm broken. I'm old. You're the man who kept us alive, who taught a scared boy how to be brave, who forgave himself enough to let people in again. I haven't forgiven myself. Then let me help you. Before either could say more, smoke, the acrid smell of burning wood. Caleb was on his feet instantly. Fire. 3 buildings were burning simultaneously. the general store, the church, and Dr. Harper's clinic where Danny slept. Victor's final gambit. Not a legal victory, not a moral one, just case and fire, and the hope of snatching the boy in the confusion. Caleb ran for the clinic. Maggie followed shouting for help. The building was already engulfed. Flames licked through windows. Smoke poured from every crack. Without hesitating, Caleb crashed through the door into hell. The heat was instant and overwhelming. Smoke choked him. But he knew where Harper's sick room was, knew where Danny would be. He found the boy in his bed, unconscious from smoke inhalation. Wrapped him in a wet blanket, lifted him, ran. They burst from the burning building just as the roof began to collapse. But Victor was waiting, standing in the street with three of his best men, all the legal pretense gone, all the civilized veneer burned away. Just a man who wanted what he wanted and would kill to get it. End of the line, Stone. Victor's gun pointed directly at Caleb, who stood there holding Danny, unable to fire back without dropping the boy. Give me the child. No, then you die, and I take him from your corpse. Maggie emerged from the smoke. Victor, stop. This is madness. Madness, this is business. Thomas stole my birthright. His son carries that theft in his veins. I'm simply correcting an error. He aimed at Danny, and in that moment his true nature showed. Not a gentleman, not a businessman, a monster who'd kill a child in cold blood for money. Maggie saw the gun rise, saw the finger tighten on the trigger, and without thought, without hesitation, threw herself between Victor's gun and Danny's small body. The shot echoed across the burning town. Maggie felt blood blooming across her shoulder. Maggie! Caleb's roar was inhuman. Rage and terror and love all mixed into one primal sound. Victor aimed again, this time at Maggie's head, to finish what he started. Sheriff Wolf's rifle spoke first. The bullet took Victor in the gun hand. His weapon flew clattering into the dirt. He screamed, clutching his shattered hand. Wolf's deputies surrounded Victor and his men. It was over. Finally, truly over. But Caleb didn't care about Victor. He knelt beside Maggie Danny, still in one arm, his other hand pressing against her wound. Stay with me. Maggie, stay with me. Her eyes fluttered open. Danny, he's safe. You saved him. Good. Her voice was faint. That's good. Then she passed out, and for one terrible moment, Caleb thought he'd lost her. Lost another person he loved. History repeating in the worst possible way. But Dr. Harper was there, singed and coughing, but alive. Get her inside quickly. They carried her to what remained of a standing building. Harper worked with desperate efficiency. The bullet had gone through clean. Painful, traumatic, but survivable. She'll live, Harper said finally, but she needs rest, weeks of it. Caleb held Maggie's hand. Danny curled against his side, both of them watching her breathe. Alive. They were all alive. Victor Ashford was dragged away in chains. Sheriff Wolf would hold him until federal marshals arrived. The charges were substantial. Murder, attempted murder, arson, conspiracy. The evidence was overwhelming. The witnesses numerous. Victor would hang. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but justice would find him. Frank Miller appeared in the doorway, his face shadowed. She going to make it? Yeah, Caleb said. Thanks to you. If you hadn't turned when you did, we'd all be dead. Just couldn't do it, kill a kid. Not for any amount of money. That took courage, Frank shrugged. Or just basic decency. Shouldn't take courage to do the minimum. He left limping back into the night, and Caleb never saw him again. But he'd never forget the man who'd chosen conscience over cash, who'd proven that even in the darkest situations, people could still choose light. 3 weeks passed. Maggie recovered slowly in Redemption Falls, the bullet wound healing clean. Danny stayed by her side every day, reading to her, bringing her flowers, refusing to be more than a few feet away. The bond between them had deepened beyond words. She'd saved his life 3 times now, taken a bullet meant for him. She wasn't just Sister Maggie anymore. She was family. Caleb kept watch over both of them, sleeping little, always alert. But as the days passed and no new threats emerged, he began to relax, to believe that maybe, just maybe, it was really over. One morning, Maggie woke to find Caleb asleep in the chair beside her bed. Actually asleep, not just dozing with one eye open. His weathered face was peaceful for once the lines of pain and guilt smoothed away. She reached out, touched his hand. He woke instantly, alert. How long was I asleep? An hour, maybe two. You needed it. Shouldn't have let my guard down. The town is safe. Victor's in jail. Federal marshals arrived yesterday. It's over, Caleb. We won. The words seemed impossible. After so much running, so much fear, the idea of safety felt foreign. Danny. Safe, healthy, playing outside with the other children. Caleb stood, walked to the window, saw Danny laughing with a group of kids his age, throwing a ball, being 6 years old instead of being hunted. He's going to be okay, Maggie said. We all are. What happens now? Now we decide what we want, who we want to be. Before Caleb could respond, Mother Superior Judith arrived from Silver Point. She'd traveled 2 days to reach Redemption Falls, and her presence carried the weight of the church behind her. Maggie sat up straighter, nervous. Mother Superior. The older woman studied her with unreadable eyes. Then surprisingly she smiled. Sister Margaret, you broke your vows, disobeyed direct orders, stole church property, fled in the night. Yes, Mother. You also saved an innocent child from murder, showed true faith through actions rather than just words, demonstrated the kind of courage the church was founded on. Maggie wasn't sure where this was going. The church recognizes your actions. You can return to the order. All will be forgiven. Your vows restored. And if I choose not to return, then you will be released from your vows with full blessing. You've served faithfully, Sister Margaret. The choice is yours. Maggie looked at Caleb standing by the window, looked at Danny visible through the glass playing in the sunshine. Her family. Not the family she'd been born to or chosen through religious vows, but the family she'd found in fire and blood and love. Mother Superior, I request release from my vows. Are you certain? I am. My calling wasn't in the convent. It was in protecting Danny, in loving, she paused, then continued, in loving Caleb Stone, in choosing to live fully rather than hide from life behind walls. Mother Judith nodded slowly. Then you have my blessing. Sometimes God's plan for us changes. The key is having the courage to follow where it leads. She produced papers. Official documents releasing Margaret Hayes from all vows to the Sisters of Charity. With a signature, Maggie was free. No longer Sister Margaret, just Maggie. A woman who could choose her own path. That evening, Caleb found Maggie at the small cemetery behind the church. She stood before two graves, temporary markers erected for Sarah and Emma Stone. Someone had placed fresh flowers there. I thought you should have proper headstones, she said, not just rocks. Caleb stood beside her, looking at his wife and daughter's names carved in wood. They would have liked you. I wish I could have met them. Amma would have asked you 1,000 questions. Sarah would have welcomed you like a sister. Do you think they'd be angry that you are with me now? Caleb was quiet for a long moment. I think they'd want me to be happy, to live, not just exist. Sarah loved me too much to want me to spend my life mourning. He turned to Maggie, and for the first time since she'd known him, there was no shadow of death in his eyes. Just life, just hope. Margaret Hayes, not Sister Margaret anymore. Just Maggie, never did like Margaret. Maggie, he tested the name, smiled. I have something to ask you. I know what you're going to ask. Do you, she met his eyes, saw the vulnerability there, the fear that even now she might say no. You're going to ask if I'll marry you, if I'll let you be a father to Danny, if I'll help you build a new life. Yes, all of that. Then my answer is yes, 1,000 times yes. Caleb knelt, took her hands in his. I'm old, I'm broken, I come with ghosts. I don't care, I love you anyway. I love you too. Didn't think I'd ever say those words again. They kissed there beside the graves of his first family, with his second family waiting. It wasn't betrayal, it was continuation. Life insisting on going forward even after the worst losses. Danny ran up, saw them kissing, and squealed with delight. Are you married now? Maggie laughed through tears. Not yet, sweetheart. Soon. Can I call Caleb Papa? Caleb's voice broke. I'd be honored. The three of them stood together, bound by choice and love, and the determination to build something good from the ashes of tragedy. Behind them, the sun set over the mountains. beautiful, peaceful home. In the cabin where the story began, the fire had burned to embers. Tommy Stone sat in silence, processing everything his grandfather had told him. So you found a new family after losing everything. Caleb nodded. We got married 2 weeks later, right there in Redemption Falls. Danny stood with me. Father Patrick performed the ceremony. And Danny, what happened to him? Caleb's expression grew sorrowful. He grew up strong and good. We raised him in a new cabin we built together. Maggie taught him reading and math. I taught him the mountains, how to survive, how to be a man. When he was 18, he enlisted. 1943, World War II. Said it was his duty to fight for the country that had given him a chance at life. Tommy's eyes widened. He'd never known about Danny. He died in France, Normandy, 2 months after D-Day. Died a hero saving 3 men in his unit. Tears streamed down Caleb's weathered face. He was 25 years old. Called me Papa until the day he shipped out. Wrote letters home every week until the letters stopped coming. I'm so sorry, Grandpa. Me too, son, me too. But you know what? Danny lived a good life, a full life. He knew love, knew safety, knew what it meant to be protected and cherished. That's more than he would have had if we'd failed. And Maggie, she died 2 years ago, 68 years old. We had 32 years together, good years, hard years sometimes, but good. Caleb stood, walked to the mantel, picked up the photograph of Maggie and Danny. She taught school here in the mountains, dozens of children over the years, made a difference in every life she touched. He set the picture down gently. So you see, Tommy, life doesn't end when you lose someone. It changes, it hurts, but it continues. And if you're brave enough to let new people in to love again, despite knowing what loss feels like, then life can still be beautiful. Tommy stood, walked to his grandfather. You're telling me this because you're afraid I won't come back from Korea. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand something. Honor isn't about dying for your country. It's about living for the people who need you, fighting to come home, surviving so you can love and be loved. But what if I don't come back? Caleb placed both hands on Tommy's shoulders. Then you'll have lived bravely, loved deeply, made a difference. That's all any of us can do. I'm scared, Grandpa. Good. Fear keeps you careful, but don't let it make you freeze. Don't let it stop you from living fully, from connecting with the men beside you, from finding all even in dark times. He pulled something from his pocket. A knife, the same knife he'd used to kill the mountain lion in 1918. This was mine, now it's yours. My father gave it to me. I gave it to Danny. He carried it through the war. Now you carry it to Korea. Tommy took the knife, felt the weight of it, the legacy. Come home, Tommy. Live a full life, love someone, build a family. That's the real victory. Not the battles you win, but the life you build after. They embraced grandfather and grandson, connected by blood and story, and the determination to keep living, despite all the reasons to give up. Morning came. Tommy in his uniform stood at the door of the cabin one last time. Caleb walked him outside. They stood looking at the mountains where so much had happened, where Caleb had died inside and been reborn, where he'd found Maggie and Danny, where he'd learned that broken things could be made whole through love. Remember, Caleb said, courage isn't the absence of fear. It's loving despite fear, living despite loss, choosing to keep going when every part of you wants to stop. Tommy nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. And Tommy, when you come home, and you will come home, come back here. Tell me your story. Pass it on to your children someday. That's how we survive. Through story, through memory, through love that refuses to die. Tommy walked away down the mountain path toward the bus that would take him to Fort Carson, to San Francisco, to Korea. Caleb watched him go as he'd watched Danny go 10 years before, as he'd watched every person he loved eventually leave one way or another. But this time he had hope, because Tommy was young and strong and smart, because the lessons had been passed on, because the story would continue. Caleb walked back to the cabin, placed fresh flowers on the 4 graves that stood on the hill. Sarah, Emma, Maggie, Danny. I kept my promises, he said to them, to all of you. Lived well, loved hard, didn't give up. He stood there as the sun rose higher, warming the mountain air, bringing light to shadow. An old man, 75 years old, who'd survived loss and found love, who'd been dead inside and been reborn, who'd learned that the human heart, like the mountains themselves, could endure anything if it chose to keep standing. The story was complete, but stories never really end. They just continue in different forms, in different hearts, in different lives. Tommy Stone would survive Korea, would come home, would marry, have children, tell them about their great-grandfather who saved a nun and a boy in 1918. And those children would tell their children. And the love would continue. The lesson would persist. That honor isn't about dying. It's about living, about choosing love over fear, about protecting the innocent, about being present for the people who need you, about keeping your promises, especially the hardest ones. Caleb Stone returned to his cabin, poured coffee, sat by the fire. Outside, the mountains stood eternal. Inside, the memories warmed him more than any flame. He'd lost everything twice, built it back twice. And in the end, that was the lesson. Life doesn't end when it breaks you. It just asks if you're brave enough to build again. And Caleb Stone had always been brave enough, even when he didn't know it, especially then.